Alex had lived in the building on North Clark Street for 3 years. It was an old, beautiful pre-war building with quirks he'd grown to love. The temperamental radiator that hissed like a cat, the window in the living room that you had to prop open with a book, the specific way you had to jiggle the key just right to get the front door to unlock. It was home. On this particular Tuesday evening, the Chicago wind was doing its usual relentless dance, whipping rain against the windows. Alex trudged up the 3 flights of stairs, groceries in one arm, fumbling for his keys with the other. He was tired. It had been a long day at the design firm, staring at screens until his eyes felt like they were full of sand. All he wanted was to put on some jazz, pour a glass of whiskey, and forget the world existed. He reached his floor, the 3rd floor, and walked down the dimly lit hallway to his apartment, 3B. He shoved the key into the lock. Usually, it required that familiar jiggle, a little persuasion. But tonight, it was different. The key slid in with unnatural smoothness, and with a single, effortless turn, the lock clicked open. That's odd, he thought. Maybe the landlord finally fixed it without telling him. He pushed the door open, flicking on the light switch just inside. The familiar warm glow of his Edison bulbs filled the space. He dropped his keys and the bag of groceries on the small entryway table. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it that morning. His gray sofa with the slightly worn spot on the left cushion, the stack of art books on the coffee table, the framed poster of a vintage Chicago map hanging on the wall. It was his apartment. Or was it? A strange feeling, like a cold finger tracing its way down his spine, began to prickle at him. Something was off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. The air felt still heavier. He walked past the entryway table and into the main living area. His gaze fell upon the gallery wall he'd so meticulously arranged next to the bookshelf. There was a collection of memories, photos from college, a trip to the coast, pictures with his parents, his sister, his friends. He squinted. From a distance, they looked normal. But as he stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. In every single photograph, his own face had been violently scratched out. Not just crossed out with a pen, but deeply gouged, the paper shredded, leaving a chaotic, angry void where his smile should have been. In a group photo with his college buddies, their faces were all clear, happy, untouched. But his was a frantic, fibrous mess. A picture of him and his sister laughing on a park bench, her face was perfect. His was annihilated. A wave of nausea rolled over him. This had to be a joke. A really twisted, elaborate prank. Who would do this? How did they even get in? He checked the door. It was locked from the inside now. No sign of forced entry. He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling so badly he almost dropped it. He needed to call someone. The police. The building manager? But as he looked at his phone, another detail slammed into him. The Wi-Fi. His network was named Clarks_3B_Jazz. This one was Clarks_3A_Blues 3A. He was in the wrong apartment. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trap bird. He was in his neighbor's apartment. He'd never met the guy in 3A. The door was usually shut. No sound ever came from within. Alex had just assumed it was a quiet person, maybe someone who traveled a lot. But this was impossible. How could his key open their door? And more importantly, why was his neighbor's apartment an exact, mirror-image replica of his own? The same worn sofa, the same art books, the same vintage map. It was a carbon copy of his life. Every piece of furniture, every decorative object, every personal item was identical. Except for the photos. In this apartment, in this twisted reflection of his own home, he had been erased. A cold dread, heavier than any fatigue he'd ever known, settled deep in his bones. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. Something deeply, fundamentally wrong. He needed to leave that now. He turned to run, to get back to the safety of his own apartment, 3B, right next door. That's when he heard it. A sound from the bedroom. A slow, raspy, wet sound. The sound of breathing. It was deep and labored, like someone struggling for air after a long run. But it was rhythmic as inhaled out exhale. A grotesque parody of sleep. Alex froze, his feet rooted to the floor. Someone was here. Someone was in the bedroom of this identical, wrong apartment. The apartment where he didn't exist. He stood there, trapped in the silence between those horrible, gargling breaths, his mind screaming at him to move, to run, to scream. But he couldn't. He was paralyzed by a fear so profound it felt like a physical weight. Then he saw the doorknob to the bedroom begin to turn. It moved with excruciating slowness. A tiny, almost imperceptible rotation, followed by a faint metallic click as the latch disengaged from the strike plate. Alex's world narrowed to that single point of focus, the brass knob turning, by a hand he could not see. The breathing from inside the room stopped. The silence that followed was somehow 1,000 times worse. It was a heavy, expectant silence, thick with malice. And then the door began to open. It didn't swing open, it crept. A black slit appeared between the door and the frame, widening by a millimeter, then another. It moved without a sound, a silent, dark mouth opening into the unlit bedroom beyond. Alex's mind reeled. Who was in there? The owner of the apartment? The person who had spent who knows how long meticulously recreating his life, only to scratch him out of it. He should have run. He knew he should have run. But a morbid, suicidal curiosity held him captive. He had to know. He had to see who was on the other side of that door. The gap was now wide enough for him to see a sliver of the darkness within. And from that darkness, something was looking back at him. He couldn't see a face, not yet. He saw a shape, a silhouette standing just inside the room, utterly still. As the door continued its silent, terrifying journey open, more of the figure was revealed. It was tall, about his height. It was wearing clothes that looked familiar, a dark gray t-shirt and jeans. The same outfit he was wearing right now. Alice's blood ran cold. His heart felt like it had stopped beating entirely. The door was now halfway open, and the figure took a single, slow step out of the bedroom and into the dim light of the living room. It was him. It was his face, his hair, his body. But the eyes were all wrong. They were wide, unblinking, and filled with a frantic, predatory hunger. The mouth was stretched into a grin that was too wide, too sharp, a rictus of pure madness that split the familiar face in two. And in its hand, it clutched a small, sharp object. A box cutter. The same kind Alex kept in his junk drawer. The thing that looked like him, this duplicate, this imposter, raised its other hand and pointed a trembling finger at Alex. Its grin widened, and a voice, a gravelly, distorted echo of his own, scraped its way out of its throat. "You're in the wrong place," it rasped, the sound wet and broken. "This is my home." It took another step forward, the box cutter held loosely, casually, at its side. The slow, labored breathing started again, a guttural rhythm in the suffocatingly still apartment. Alex finally found his legs. He stumbled backward, his hands flailing behind him, searching for the front door, for the lock, for escape. He was a stranger here. He was the one who didn't belong. He had walked into a life that wasn't his, and now its rightful, horrifying owner was here to reclaim it. The imposter took another step, and another, its awful, familiar face locked on his, the smile never faltering. It was time to go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more chilling tales. See you next time.